Sometimes all it takes is one little comment online to set off an absolute firestorm. And that is exactly what happened recently. A conversation about dating standards just blew up, and it forced everyone to talk about a really tricky question. Where do you draw the line between just having a personal type and, well, harmful prejudice? So how did this one thing get so big? Let's break it down.
This right here is the sentence that kicked the whole thing off. It was said during a podcast in a discussion about dating preferences, specifically in the gay community. And almost instantly, the internet just lit up.
And this really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is saying you have a type just a harmless way of explaining what you're attracted to? Or could it actually be reinforcing some pretty negative stereotypes about people's bodies, their health, maybe even who they are as a person?
Okay, so to really get a handle on what's going on here, we've got to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Because in the Philippines, the way people talk about bodies can be, let's just say, very different than in other places.
I mean, if you look through online forums, you will find story after story about this. You see your auntie for the first time in months, and the first thing she says is a comment about your weight. And a lot of the time, it's not meant to be mean. It's just a casual thing, almost like talking about the weather.
And this difference in culture can cause some serious issues. There was this one story on Reddit from a user who actually got in trouble at their job in the US for saying something about a coworker's weight. To them, back home, it was a totally normal thing to say. It just goes to show you how differently these comments can land. This is such a common greeting. It's super blunt, right? And it's really the first half of this cultural pressure cooker, where your body is always up for discussion. But it doesn't end there.
But here's the catch-22. Say you do lose weight after being called fat. Well, the comments don't stop. Now you might get hit with criticism for being too skinny, sometimes even getting compared to an addict. It's this impossible no-win situation where your body is never quite right.
All right, so with that cultural backdrop in mind, let's dive into the specific preferences that actually sparked this whole debate.
And wow, they were specific. We're talking a certain look, a certain vibe, even a preferred ethnicity. But the part that really got people talking was the body type rule. Chubby is okay, but only if you also have muscle. If you're chubby without muscle, that's a hard pass. And here's the justification that was given for this. The idea was that a muscular body is a sign of someone who's active and takes care of themselves. On the flip side, a body without that muscle was basically interpreted as a red flag for an inactive lifestyle. And that was the deal breaker.
Then, to really hammer the point home, this hypothetical question was thrown out. You've got two choices. A guy with an amazing body but a face you're just not into, or a chubby guy who doesn't have those muscles. Who do you pick?
The answer was the hip-on. Now, for those who don't know, this is a super common Filipino slang term. It literally means shrimp. And the idea is you find the body attractive but not the face. Kind of like how you eat a shrimp's body but toss the head. The choice made it crystal clear. The body was the absolute priority.
So as you can probably imagine, the internet had thoughts. Lots of them. The reaction was fast, it was passionate, and people pretty much split into two different camps. So on one side, you had people saying, hey, it's just a preference. They argue that everyone has standards, comparing it to women who prefer tall guys. The general vibe was that everyone else was just being way too sensitive. But on the other side, the critics were saying, hold on, the problem is that you're linking a body type to being lazy or unhealthy. They pointed to the condescending tone and said that statements like these, especially on a public platform, just feed into harmful stigmas.
And for most of the critics, this was the heart of it. The issue was never really about having a type. It was the judgment that came with it. The problem wasn't liking muscles. It was the sweeping generalization that if you don't have them, you must not be taking care of yourself.
So all of this brings us right back to that central conflict. When we're talking about who we find attractive, where exactly is that line between a private feeling and a public statement that can actually do some damage?
And this really is the fundamental tug-of-war in this whole thing. On the one hand, who you're into feels so deeply personal, right? Like, it shouldn't be anyone else's business. But on the other hand, when you voice those preferences out loud on a big platform, they don't just exist in a bubble. They become part of a larger conversation, and they can end up reinforcing stereotypes that really hurt people.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. Maybe the question isn't so much about what your type is, but why it's your type. Are those preferences genuinely 100% yours? Or are they shaped, even a little bit, by the culture and the stereotypes we're all swimming in? There's no easy answer for sure. But it's something worth thinking about.